Now Dave's going to give us a talk about branding and positioning, as you all know. He's been a very, very strong supporter, a very good and very strong supporter of Seedcamp from the very beginning. And if you look on our website under resources, you can find several of his videos. They're great. We've had him here in the past as well, and we had some action and drama last year as he went through a lot of great feedback. So we're looking forward to having him here. He's a guru when it comes to everything having to do with metrics and measuring how your startup is doing. Please give a warm welcome to Dave McClure.
This is somewhat of a new talk. I've done this in a couple forms twice before, but it's always a bit of a jaunt, so forgive me if I'm a little loose on this. For those of you who haven't seen my slides and presentations before, prepare to be assaulted. They are an unholy thing from hell, but you probably won't forget them. I love Comic Sans, so fucking deal with it. Sorry. This deck is also likely to potentially get you arrested. It's probably wrong in a bunch of areas, and I am sure as hell going to offend somebody in the audience. So for those of you who have delicate sensibilities, you may want to leave the room now. Okay, so here's an overview of what we're going to talk about. Actually, so just a point. I know a lot of people say, you know, don't put all your materials in your slides, don't talk to your slides. I actually think that's completely bullshit because 99% of the people who are going to see your slides, if they're any good, are actually going to see them when you're not in the room. I use SlideShare. I tweeted these out, and actually probably about at least 25 times as many people see my slides on SlideShare as actually hear me in person. So I actually do put most of the material on there. The trick is actually not to say the exact same fucking thing as what's on your slides and be a little bit entertaining and different. But if I'm boring, at least you have the material there to look at. Anyway, that's an overview. We're going to talk through most of this stuff. I've been a geek, I've been a coder, I've been an entrepreneur, I've been a marketer. I guess I'm an angel investor now. That's probably the easiest of all of those jobs. Hopefully I don't fuck this one up as much as the previous ones. 500 Startups has invested in a lot of companies. We're sort of known for being a little bit different. We've invested in 375 companies out of the 2 funds we currently operate in the last 2 years. Probably 50 of those companies are dead, and another 100 will be in the next year or so. But with luck, maybe 20% of them will have positive outcomes. Actually, a couple of people here have already had some positive outcomes. Tai Tran and Ed Spiegel are 2 of them. Sorry, Ed Spiegel's in FB Fund, not in 500 Startups. Anyway, so big thing about us is we're trying to focus a lot on product and marketing. We do follow on invest in some number of our deals, particularly ones that are working, we think. And we're pretty much all over the world. We've invested probably about 20% of those companies are outside the US in one form or another. We have companies in Asia, Europe, Latin America, Australia, just about to sign paperwork on an investment in an incubator in Nairobi. Jiran was our first investment in the Middle East. We have venture partners on the ground in Brazil, 2 in Mexico, 1 about to join us in India, and hopefully China and Southeast Asia by next year. So anyway, we try and get around. That's the commercial. So if you don't listen to any of this crap that I say, I find these books kind of interesting. I talk about them a lot. How many of you are startup founders in the audience? And keep your hands raised if you consider yourself technical as opposed to other. Okay, how many of you are startup founders that you consider yourselves not primarily technical? Okay, any of you take courses on behavioral psychology or psychology? Yeah. Okay, well that's better than most. Most of the time when I talk in Silicon Valley, a lot of the founders are engineers who have no background in any type of soft skills, science, behavioral science, or anything like that. So we spend a lot of time thinking about programming. Sometimes we think about design and visual elements, but we very rarely think about human psychology. And most of what we're doing, at least when we're trying to get the customer to use our products, is really deliver some type of marketing message or appeal to them that is driving to a human need. And in particular, I'll talk about this later, those are really like deep-seated fear, power, sex, et cetera, greed, all sorts of things that really are probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years old in development. So a lot of our sort of cerebral and high-minded ideals that we think about a lot are fairly recent. Most things are very, very basic. And they're driven usually on the web via text and pictures. Now more recently, maybe video and sound in a few cases. But a lot of things are delivered via images and text in combination. And we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about that as founders. We think about, structure of code and, very technical sort of like marketing from like click-throughs and conversion rates, but we don't often think so much about what is this sort of deep-seated evolutionary need or psychology that I'm trying to appeal to. Now, you're still going to have to deliver a product that delivers against that promise, but just even understanding what's the visual and verbal framework that you're trying to operate within is extremely overlooked by most people. So these two books, The Mating Mind and Spent, these are kind of the theory and lab by a guy named Jeffrey Miller. They talk a lot about how brain development happened over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, and how we respond to marketing in kind of that context. Two others, this one's actually been around for a while, Influence, Psychology, Persuasion. That's a very sort of time-honored text in a lot of MBA programs. That doesn't mean it sucks. It's actually kind of interesting. And this one you probably haven't heard of, Understanding Comics, is again talking about static images and text in sequence and how that is used to tell a story. And really would encourage you to think and take a look at that one because it doesn't come across people's desks quite as often. Okay, so what I'm basically going to try and get at is not like extreme amounts of marketing, but really just very simple concepts for representing your company and how to take more risk with that early. So the really basic message, how many people heard the expression, you never get a second chance to make a first impression? That's complete fucking bullshit as far as startups go. Most times when you have a marketing campaign, you will be extremely lucky if even single thousands of people see your marketing campaign or message. If you fuck it up, 0.0000001% of your potential audience will have heard of you. And you can fuck that up multiple times, over and over and over again, and no one will really care. If you actually impact someone in a virally negative campaign way, you should be so goddamn fucking lucky to have a negative brand early on in your career. And probably the positive press that you will get out of that will still overwhelm the potential negative impact. Maybe if you're in banking, like if you're a startup that's in financial services, you might need to worry about that. When we were developing Mint, there were some legitimate reasons to maybe launch late. Everybody else, there's hardly any negative press that you will get that will impact you negatively in the long run. And most times you will be a fucking like pimple on a gnat's ass as far as your impact on the universe. So your opportunity to do multiple high-risk things early on is very significant because you have fucking nothing. You have nothing. How many of you have more than 1,000 customers? Right, a few. I'm talking about current Seedcamp startups. How many of you have more than 1,000 customers? One, okay. So most of you are not going to offend any long-term existing customers. And if you do, still a very small percentage of what your future potential is if you actually ramp and grow. Most cases, you don't know what the fuck your marketing impact is on those people. So you want to take risk early. You will probably get no reaction at all in most cases. Heaven forbid you get any kind of positive or negative reaction. That is win. If people hate you or scream against you or think you're fucking stupid, you're onto something. That is win. So take risk. How many of you are British? You have a cultural disadvantage. You have to overcome. You get it? All right. So the other part of this is you must start from some element that is real, true, and actually represents you. So I'm not asking you to do something completely foreign. What I'm asking you to do is find a grain of truth, of some significance that you feel is correct, and then magnify that as much as fucking possible. In crazy ways, ways that you are completely uncomfortable with, but to test and understand the impact of those little grains blown out into big story, and then gradually find the elements of that story that resonate, either negatively or positively. The reason I'll talk more about the negative resonance, but eventually you want to turn it to positive. Let's look at this image. How many people have seen this image before? It is incredibly powerful. I believe the background for this was the guy who's shooting him is a general in the South Vietnamese army. South Korea or South Vietnam? I'm not sure. South Vietnam, right. I believe his family was killed previous to then shooting this dude. Really hardcore. Here's another one. Aww. Everybody go aw with me. 1, 2, 3. Aww. Now that might still be offensive to people, but like those two images are very, very stark. You'll have some kind of reaction to that. Other things positive, much you may not be able to read that text. Daredevils, babies, and kittens. Kittens and puppies actually are awesome. This slide is fucking annoying as hell, right? Okay, so again, if you're from the engineering side, so I started out as an engineer, although I'm on the marketing side more often now. Originally, I distrusted people in sales and marketing like the plague. I thought they were evil, lying sons of bitches. I never wanted to be close to them or near them until later when I realized they actually drive a lot of revenue that paid my salary. And then I was like, oh, okay, I will tolerate them. Right? And then gradually I was like, wait, they're not always completely evil. Some of them are actually good some of the time. And then, you know, in the long run, I started to be like, okay, there's actually interesting and creative things that come out of marketing. Right? So it took me a long time to go from you're completely fucking evil to I tolerate you to some of you are not completely evil to okay, this is actually useful to wow, I really enjoy marketing. Right? It's been kind of a 20-year sort of like journey from I fucking think this is the dark side to okay, there's some elements here that are interesting. So granted, it can be evil and can be the dark side, but there are things that you should know and understand about the dark side of the force, which you may want to incorporate into your existence. Main thing is to understand why building a storytelling culture is important. You can be the best fucking engineer on the planet. If you do not have a story, it is very rare that that product or engineering like offering will sell itself. In a few cases that does happen, but most of the times great products in engineering do require great, not even just good storytelling as well. In most cases, that can be coalesced down to a very simple story. In fact, it's best if it is coalesced into a simple story. And another thing that we forget about is it's always relative to the position of competitors in the market, not all competitors, but competitors that are visible and aware to your customers. So you do not have to compete against all competitors that you are aware of. You need to compete against competitors that your customers are aware of. Very important distinction. You might have hundreds of customers that nobody else fucking knows about. I'll talk a little bit more about how you niche to win against very large or successful competitors. And then this one's a little bit unusual. Fourth bullet there is embracing negative or shameful positioning. I recently wrote a post that was a little bit dangerous for me. I was not completely attacking Paul Graham and Y Combinator, but sort of, and was trying to distinguish 500 startups from YC. Now, Y Combinator is king of the hill in Silicon Valley. It's always been, for at least the last 3 or 4 years, a very sort of singular brand and awareness. And what I did was sort of play the Avis thing, like we're number 2, right? It's even sort of a little bit of a stretch to say that we're number 2 compared to them, but like embracing a number 2 positioning is kind of a weird marketing to go after. Right? I think it actually worked. I don't know completely, but understanding where you can claim something that's not completely positive and own that for differentiation purposes is actually pretty compelling. And then the last part is knowing when it's actually working and then getting back to product. Like you do not need to work on branding forever. You don't need to work on product forever. There's like a goal that you have in mind, and then once you kind of get to that goal, it's probably just efforts to sustain that. You don't necessarily have to like work forever on branding. So what is a brand? Originally, the term came from hot stamping iron into cattle, branding. I also note that branding is usually full of pain. That's not completely true, but at least for the exercise for most startups, it's usually painful. Most of you will not be successful in establishing a brand. This is also a corollary to most of you will fail as startups. Is that any impact? Most of you will fail. Most of you will not be able to establish a brand. Most of you won't spend enough time on brand to even have a shot at fucking winning. But even for those of you who do spend time on brand, you will probably fail. It's probably a lot more important than your product, at least initially. In the long run, your product probably is important to compete against other successful competitors who also have brand position in the market, because your customers will at least try products where brand has some impact, and then they might evaluate them competitively to others. So this is completely non-intuitive when you're thinking as an engineer, but probably working on brand and marketing position is actually a first-order issue ahead of building a successful product. Do you guys get that? Does that change your thoughts about like how you spend your time? You probably spend 6 to 12 months of your time building your product before you even think 0.1 about brand and market. And actually, that's completely fucking opposite and wrong. Should probably be testing marketing and branding messages to see if your customers have any potential reaction to it. And then if you find a reaction to it, build a product that is differentiated from other competitors that your customers also react to. Now, I know none of you are actually going to fucking do this. But you might actually think about what I'm saying and potentially realize that, yeah, that might actually be closer to reality. OK, so why and who is branding important to? Well, it's not just for customers. In fact, primarily right now, it's probably important to investors and hires. So like the reason that people want to get in TechCrunch should not be for customers. In most cases, your product, for some of you, your product might be squarely in line with the TechCrunch audience. But most reasons to get in TechCrunch are downstream investor awareness and employee. Do you understand that part of it? Because that's absolutely true. I tell all of our startups, like, unless your audience is exclusively on TechCrunch, the reason you want to get in TechCrunch is for next round financing and potentially for hires. And it's good background for other mainstream and industry trade verticals that are looking for background on your company. So there are plenty of reasons for you to think about brand early in your existence that are way ahead of even getting the customer. Just understanding like how you get investor mind share and employee mind share and potentially press. Later, partners and customers probably also important. Now, I don't want to brag, but I actually think we've done a pretty decent job with 500 startups in just the last 2 years. And we thought about it a lot. Like, I tried to think about, like, we looked at, calling it a couple different things. Pirate ventures, sandworm ventures. I was really into like the Dune mythology thing for a while. We were a little bit worried about, like, if we go with pirates or something that's very like violent, that we weren't going to incorporate women into kind of that thought process. And we wanted to go after education and women founders a lot. So it was actually like a conscious decision to not be too violent in the way that we branded that. I'm serious. We thought a lot about how do we differentiate from other like leaders that are already in people's heads, like what's different about YC. So we went after a lot of design and marketing components that were something we thought maybe YC is really good at representing in people's minds, engineering and sort of product leadership. So we're like, okay, what things aren't they maybe that good at? Design might be one thing. User experience, the international component we started to play up quite a bit. Women founders is another thing that they're not necessarily known for. So you try and like find, this is kind of more in that niche to win, like how do you identify what competitive elements you can win on even against a big and entrenched competitor. Apple and Nike, I think like immediately iconic in people's minds what those things represent. I'm not comparing myself to Apple or Nike, at least give me a few years. I've chosen a lot of Benetton images. I like find them to be striking. They maybe have jumped the shark and a little bit over the hill. I don't know if they're more familiar to people in Europe, but I just find them to be incredibly striking and they make you think. So I talked about this before, is like when you have nothing to lose, you should really take more risk. As you get more successful, then you can back off the risk. Once you have an established sort of customer base, you may not want to fuck with it quite as much as you are during the early time frames. And here's the thing is like pissing people off is actually okay. In most cases, obviously, you can take that to an extreme. But really understanding like why do they get angry? Why do they even care? Like you've obviously tapped into something if they are angry, if they completely didn't give a fuck about you, like, they wouldn't get angry. They might be just annoyed that you're in their face, but like usually there's something else that you're tapping into if you get people to be angry. And here's the great thing is, like, in some cases being angry or negative is more interesting and more useful to you than being positive. Because when people hate you, they will actually tell you information about what they hate. When people like you, they might not give you detailed information. So if they like you, you may not know why they like your product. If they hate you, they will probably say, I don't like this color, I don't like this feature, this didn't work for me, this really sucks. They'll give you more detailed feedback. It's actually easier to iterate around hate than it is around love. It's certainly easier to iterate around hate than indifference. You cannot build a brand around indifference. There's just nothing here for you to grab onto. If you're interested in this, like a classic example of how you go after larger companies. So suppose that you're a startup that's competing for some type of female customer, and you maybe are competing with Johnson & Johnson, very, very large, entrenched, and old brand in the US. They produce a lot of medical and household goods. They might define their market as all women or mothers in the US or even around the world. If you said, okay, I'm going to define my target market as women between the ages of 20 and 27 who have 2 kids, live in an urban area, and speak 2 languages, you've now very much defined your audience to be differentiated. It's easy to win against Johnson & Johnson by defining that market. Now, it may be a smaller market than you want to go after in the long run, but by niching down to a very specific target audience, you can produce a solution and a brand and a product that easily beats the pants off other large competitors. Understanding how far to niche down or how not far to niche down is part of your creative juice as an entrepreneur. But understanding where you are competing against large customer and defining the elements of your strategy relative to that large customer are important so that you can stand out, so that you can be iconic. Right? The crazy fucking thing that is like our 2-year-old venture firm actually has a little bit more mind share in people's heads than firms like Kleiner that have been around the valley for like 30 fucking years. That like blows me away that we've been able to sort of do that. But for a lot of people who are new to the market, we actually have bigger mind share because of some of the things that we've done, which are a little bit outlandish, and maybe also because we use like certain mediums for communication, which older firms are less used to. Remember, love and hate are okay, at least in the beginning. I'm assuming all of you kind of recognize the people who are listed, shown there. I'm sure that you could choose other images, but like most of these people and the words are iconic in their imagery. Like they stand for things that are so powerful that you can like, see these pictures in your head just by me describing them to you, and they represent like concepts which are incredibly strong across multiple cultures. So standing for something when you're developing your brand, not that all of you are going to have life-changing impact on your customers, but you should have something that sort of represents an iconic image in your customer's mind. If you can do that, lots of things become easier. This might be a single word or emotion, it might be a single picture, it might be an animal, a color, a number. Another thing is like not to be afraid of weakness or shame. Again, sort of aiming for that second position in the market or admitting weakness and guilt establishes trust with people in many cases, right? Admitting that you are powerless in certain situations establishes a bond of trust that you can use to later build other things on top of. It's very non-intuitive to admit fault or weakness in a public forum, but it can help you build relationships with the people that you're trying to talk to. Another phrase I like to say is aim for the moon but land on the roof. A lot of times, even if you have outlandish goals, sometimes you won't reach the outlandish goals, but you'll still reach positive outcomes that are useful. This picture is likely to be offensive to some people. I'd like to sort of just pause for a little bit and think about that. So there's many things which are deep-seated in our humanity. Fear, sex, power. You might think it's a sexist statement, but I often say that great products get people laid, made, or paid. It's slightly different math if you're female, but there are still other things that are also powerful, some of them similar for men and women. But there are these basic sort of control points in the universe, whether they're Maslow's hierarchy, whether they're food or power, whether they're reptilian brain or high-minded things. we are often impacted, again, by the combination of text and images. So how many of you have done, taken your current company name or product name and done some type of search for related terms on Google for search? Yeah, OK. So I would consider doing that exercise in a lot of different areas. So take your company name, your product offering, the benefits or fears or negative outcomes, your competitors' names, and then look and build a vocabulary based on all of those terms. And then see, like, are any of those terms being searched on a lot? What are people paying for those terms? You know, building that vocabulary in text, and then also similar exercise, building that vocabulary in images, right? So what images are relevant to your universe? And those could be, you know, babies, could be cars, could be money, could be, you know, all sorts of things. But like there is a text and image vocabulary that's sort of a relevant playing field to you operate in. Most of you have no idea like what number of those terms, or particularly the visual images, have on your audience. Like, and that's the fundamental building blocks of kind of your promise, of your marketing campaigns. It's almost like silly how much we don't even play around with that, right? Like if you were hiring engineers and they didn't have fundamental elements of code structure kind of in their understanding, you know, you'd be like, wow, you're completely retarded, there's no way I'm going to hire you. Right? But we have similar ignorance about human psychology within our organizations. We very rarely understand how the human mind reacts to the text and images of the marketing campaigns and promises that we go after. Extremely on the images side. And I have no idea how the sound and video work. Like those are two areas I'm still, you know, trying to understand more about. Like it's really, like, it's crazy that we're just like absolutely ignorant about these very fundamental building blocks of how we talk to our customers. So like finding your tribe and understanding that vocabulary, again, how those combinations work, using tests, whether those are on search environments, whether you can do those in paid or organic methods, looking at Facebook as testing environments. I'm particularly of opinion that YouTube is a really large and untested area for campaigns. I haven't quite figured it out yet. Are people familiar with how annotations work in YouTube? So it's like the tie is. So just very briefly for those of you who are not familiar with it. So you can actually have clickable points in the video. Usually it's just the banner advertising on the bottom third, but for certain types of videos you can have clickable elements above the area, so they're not in ad blind areas. The challenges right now, except for, I believe, very large advertisers on YouTube or certain nonprofits, those clickable areas only go to YouTube landing pages. I don't know if they've opened it up for non-YouTube landing pages. Ty, do you know the answer on that? You have to buy ads? OK, and if you buy ads, then you're able to use annotations, or you're also able to click through from annotations to off YouTube landing pages. Can I go to my own landing page after that? Yeah, you buy it. You can now, OK. Right, so the ability to like do like pay-per-click advertising on YouTube and go to your own landing page is kind of like amazingly large universe, like probably as large in the future as the text advertising universe is. But like, how many of you done like YouTube advertising? Yeah, one. Right. You know how many people like look at YouTube and how many hours per day they spend on it? Like, it's probably as big as Facebook.
4 billion views a day.
What was it? 4 billion? 4 billion? Yeah, I know it was 800 or 900 million users, and I thought the hourly usage was either about the same as Facebook or slightly higher. Right, so like we're sitting here like, you know, amazingly boggled by how big Facebook is and what impact they're having on the advertising industry, and we have no understanding of what that impact is from YouTube world. Just a thought, yeah. So like, I think there's interesting ways to tap into our reactions to these marketing campaigns and messages that are very, very basic. Again, text and image combinations. And you can do that via search engine marketing landing pages on either Google or Facebook advertising and see some results there. I have no idea like what those are like in video yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be very, very important in the future. So embracing not just the hero, but the villain. How many of you love Lord Vader? Darth Vader fans? Yes. Batman or Superman? How many like Superman? Batman? Yeah, way more interesting, right? fucking a little bit dark there. There's all sorts of crazy shit going on. So like there are some interesting things that embracing the dark side will do for your brand or product. Now I'm not saying all of you can use those positively, but understand that there are certain things that you may be a little fearful of. Again, while you're a startup, while you're early, you may want to start testing with. Understand like what would be the most offensive thing I could do to my customers? When we were coming up with a name for 500 startups, we were going through a brainstorming exercise. And at one point, we flipped. I encourage you to do this if you're ever trying to figure out a name, is start thinking about all the things you would not want to call your company. Right? Like one of the things we came up with that we really were like, wow, that would be really bad was Fail Factory. Like that was like, wow, what worse name could we come? And I was thinking about it for a while. I was like, wow, wait a second, that actually might be an awesome name, right? And I really came close to like calling it Fail Factory. I couldn't get my other partners to like buy into it. Mainly because if we really fucked up the first year, then they would be like, oh, Fail Factory, you really are a Fail Factory. I couldn't quite take the risk to call it Fail Factory until I knew we weren't going to fail. But like there's lots of things that you start to understand once you embrace the negatives and start to understand like it's very easy to define in many cases what your customers are going to hate or despise, right? And there is juice in that. There is like really interesting learning and knowledge that comes from understanding what people hate or despise or fear, right? What things are you ashamed to tell people about? How many people have had sex in the last 2 weeks? How many people have not had sex in the last year?
One.
You're all laughing. There's something juicy there. I don't know exactly what it is. So like embracing the negative, at least as a learning exercise, is a very, very interesting topic. You can learn a lot of data from that. Sorry, I guess I should have been showing you this slide for a little bit. Who you're secretly jealous of. That's another good one. Yes. Okay, here's a fun exercise. So I did this talk, I guess about 3 months ago. And I was trying to think about, I was really not ready for the talk, and I was trying to think, what's my simple device if I really fuck up this talk that I can use that I know I'll get like a reaction out of? This is a finger, right? It's just a finger. It's just a finger. When I do this, like, do you have a reaction to that? When I do this, do you have a negative? Yeah, see, right? It came right back. Now, it's a thing, right? It's just my finger. The word fuck has a sound to it. It's just a sound, right? But we have a reaction to it. Okay, now I want to give you permission. Give me that finger back, right? Oh, that's weak. That is so fucking weak. Come on, watch this. Give it back to me. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, I would like you to choose a partner. Find that partner. Just get ready. Now one thing. You know, like the kung fu movies, you don't want to hit them. You actually just want to stop right in front of their nose. So just judge. I'm serious. Like, turn to a partner right now. I want you to like do this exercise with me. You guys are fucking Brits, aren't you? Terrible. Just imagine the person next to you is Irish. I don't know, whatever. Right, exactly. Now, like, just try and hit them inches from their nose, right? Don't actually hit them. You guys are going to go after it. No. With this, dude. With this.
Ready.
Okay, now give it back to him.
I feel myself getting fingered.
They're brothers, so they do this all the time.
Yeah, I know.
Fucking asshole!
Wow. Oh yeah, right. Are there any Scots? This is the thing for Scots, right?
It's not Scottish.
Isn't it? I don't know. So like, it's kind of curious how we have these like visceral reactions to this stuff. One more time. All of you give me the finger. Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm not feeling it. You ready? I'm going to give it back to you. 1, 2. Fuck you! Can you give me that back one more time? This is the last time. Last chance. You will not be able to flip somebody off in public without like having amazing negative repercussions. 1, 2, 3. Keep that. Keep that emotion. You may need that when your startup is fucking failing. You're going to need that. All right. So like, that's a little bit of an extreme example, but I want to get to like, how can you create powerful imagery for you and your customers that is represented by some image or word, some representation that's singular, that is iconic? How can you do that? How can you create that? Can you find negatives, things that make you ashamed or fearful? Would you be willing to write a blog post that talks about when the last time you had sex was in order to make your business successful? Would you be able to talk about sometime you've been mugged in the street? Would you be able to talk about the time when you were afraid or ashamed or alone? Like, are you willing to take that risk? Okay, when you start to find something that works, if you find anything that works, iterate on that. Try and double down on it some more. If you find someone that loves you, it's working. Remember, if someone hates you, it's also working. Something there is interesting. When you've got that signal, you want to try iteration, repetition. Can you find the pieces of that which are reproducible? You may be just lucky in getting something that works. You may not know why. So once you've got something that is either like getting people to love you or getting people to piss you off, you want to understand the elements and atomic like construction of what are they pissed off at? What are they actually loving? Can you do that again? Can you do it multiple times? When I first did that talk, like this thing, I was like scared shitless I was going to like piss people off. Now I know it's an element that it works. I can go back to it many times, right? And like find things that work, like steal. Don't go stealing everything, but like look at other people's elements that have been successful before. There is a basic math here to kind of like human psychology that you can tap into. It may take practice, but understanding how that works, you can figure that out. All of this should start from something that you know is true, right? You can't manufacture complete like bullshit and fabrication. You want to find an element that you know and understand is true for you, right? And then you want to, again, blow that out and magnify that in extreme possible ways as you can like do, ways that you might be initially uncomfortable with, right? But if you start from something that is like you know is your heart, you know is true, you know represents your product or your customer or your service, right? You can maybe figure out how to magnify that and get that to work. So start from the heart, be yourself, be authentic and comfortable with what you are trying to magnify. But be the most awesome and passionate you that is possible in the world. Give yourself permission to be fucking awesome. Do not be scared. Give yourself permission to make mistakes as you try and discover how you can be awesome. And maybe you don't even have to be loud to be awesome. And sometimes even weakness can be a great point of branding and discussion. Sharing the parts of you that are vulnerable, like other people, that will be unusual for other people. They will maybe like, they won't like that, but in many cases they'll be like, wow, that's unique, I might trust that. So that's it. I'm sure there's other things to figure out, but give yourself permission to go be awesome. If you have questions or comments, I'll take them for a few minutes. We have a few minutes. If I've scared the shit out of you, we can end now. Yes?
Who does this exceptionally well?
Who does this exceptionally well? Let's see. You're talking about startup world or just generally speaking? I mean,
Companies, I guess, rather.
Apple recently. Yeah, to some extent.
Startups do it well.
What startups do it well?
I think Simple do it pretty well.
I think Uber's done a pretty decent job. Maybe TaskRabbit.
B2B startup.
Yeah, that's a hard one, right? I don't know, it's a little bit different. So one thing I will admit is that understanding this branding element is less important if you have a direct sales sort of model. Like you have more chance to in person convince people of your product whether or not your brand sucks if you're directly selling to them. It's much more important when you're remote, where your kind of branding materials have to work, you know, where you're not there. So consumer and small business sort of marketing, it's much more important. Salesforce, I haven't really done as much of this talk as I want, so I'm still kind of exploring a lot of this. What do you guys think are great startup examples?
Simple.
Mm-hmm. Probably Mint was pretty good at that in the past.
Who put the block of ice outside the... WePay.
WePay.
We went to that was...
Also one of our companies, thanks, that's great. Yeah, PayPal back in the day I think was pretty good at some stuff.
They're good at pissing their customers off.
Yeah, actually we were. We really pissed people off, man. That was just like annoying sometimes.
Salesforce was a good example.
Yeah, Salesforce. I think maybe Evernote has done a pretty good job.
I think GoDaddy do a pretty good job of being rather offensive.
And pissing people off at the same time,
That's
yeah.
other B2B-ish.
Yeah.
But there's still
Yeah.
attention.
I don't know, people think Dropbox is a good example or not? No, you don't think so?
What do they stand for?
Wonga.
Wonga? Yeah.
Seedwave,
Don't know them.
secondary ticketing, big issue here.
Okay.
Big issue, ticket tagging.
I'm a big believer in sort of short domain names or relatively simple. A lot of times people will choose domain names and if you can't repeat them or hear them, a lot of times they're hard. Originally I worked for a company called Simply Hired, and when you said it, you couldn't actually tell whether it was Simply Hire or Simply Hired. It's just long. There was a company that I was working with, I was an investor for, that was looking at domains, and they ended up, it was competing with Crunchbase. They had an opportunity to choose a name that was Trade Vibes or Fighting Pig. And I was like, Fighting Pig is awesome. And they chose Trade Vibes, and I was like, wow, like I can't believe you chose that other name. I thought Fighting Pig is just like so brandable, you could do that. In fact, like so many things with pig or panda in them are just like really easy branding. They're like very approachable animals. I don't know, like both of those, I don't know.
Especially the huge tusks and something.
Yeah, maybe seals, I don't know. We're going along on this, yes, sorry.
Quick question with regards to startups that are struggling with a very, very product-led team.
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier in your talk about, you know, one, you have to start thinking about the branding earlier on. What techniques do you use within 500 startups to encourage guys who are basically heads down, coders type people to actually go out and do that and overcome personality?
Right. So, I mean, we try and get designers into the companies as soon as possible.
If they don't have the money, let me put that caveat.
So we have designer mentors come in and work with them. Not most people don't do it, but I would say doing landing page exercises early. You may still get a marketing campaign that's working and have to figure out like what you're delivering on, but just understanding search terms and frequency and what people are paying for them, and then what images and landing pages work against that. We're an investor in Unbounce, which also helps provide some of those testing tools automatically. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, again, we see it all the time and we don't emphasize it enough, like just starting to work on the marketing campaigns before you actually build the product. It's just like, we do it in reverse. I mean, we build the product, then we try and figure out the marketing, and like, it's very ass backwards. Yeah.
I know you've logged that you think Angel is pretty awesome. I wonder what you think about their new documents that they just released about.
I mean, Angel List?
Fund online.
The Series C documents they're doing for free, I think that's fucking great. Yeah. I mean, there's a different conversation about whether to do convertible notes versus priced rounds. That's also popular meme these days. But legal documents, my belief is they are a commodity, at least in the beginning stages, and they probably should be free or close to zero in cost. I'm sure the legal folks won't necessarily agree with me on that.
Just to jump in and pipe, the Series C documents have been translated for Europe, and they're under seedsummit.org. So that's the seedsummit.org. So they're in German, in French, not in Irish, but for the Irish section.
There's a talk that I haven't done that I want to do sometime, which is psychology of constructing an investment round, like how you build a round and get people bought in. And some people may consider that evil because you're sort of building social proof kind of elements, but like, getting small checks early from anyone, eventually getting to a notable investor, eventually getting to a lead investor that sets terms, and then moving back down and sort of filling out the round and optimizing for sort of valuation and price. Like, there's a whole exercise around that I think is much more important than the structure of the legal documents that most people, again, don't think or talk about. So I'll try and put that together sometime. Yeah.
Okay. Knowing that you said you were first a coder, and then an entrepreneur, and then angel investor, now you're VC.
By the way, by the fact that I went through all those things means I wasn't awesome at any of them.
And I wonder what drives you now. Like, how do you see things going?
So I really feel like I'm an entrepreneur, just happen to be operating on the finance side. There's tons of places to improve the process. Right now, we're spending a lot of time working on international. There's lots of really amazing talent in the U.S., and particularly in Silicon Valley, but 6.5 billion people don't live in the U.S. We were trying to come up with like, how do we establish unique branding elements? We were like, okay, international and women are sort of our two like core things where we feel like we're kind of have a great position and no one's really competing with it. And so I was like, wow, okay, international and women, that's like 98% of the market. Okay, great. There's still a lot of really simple low-hanging fruit to go after. In terms of languages and geographies, we kind of think about probably English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic as global languages. That's probably where we're going to, and there's more to it than that. If you look at like demographics and growth patterns and internet penetration, those markets also tend to be really interesting. So we've really done a few investments in China. We've done only one right now in the Arabic-speaking market, but those are probably going to be future places for us to go after. Latin America is like vastly overlooked by most people. A lot of people have discovered Brazil right now. I mean, that's definitely very interesting, but Mexico and Spanish-speaking market is really quite interesting, very large market. It's very fragmented, but long-term potential of interest. Other things, I think, still we underestimate design and UX and sort of building at least consumer and small business startups. So trying to get those people in earlier, and then the recent growth hacking meme, it's a little, it's a little trite, but understanding customer acquisition is really, again, underappreciated by most companies. The product side is actually not that hard. There's lots of very interesting, meaningful problems to be solved that are not necessarily technically that challenging. Usually it's the customer acquisition side, which is much riskier. That, again, is a little bit of anathema to people who are traditional engineering sort of folks, but yeah, there's a lot of problems which are relatively easily solvable with the tools and infrastructure we have today, but marketing and customer acquisition is still an unsolved problem in many ways.
From your experience in the Founders Fund, I understand you worked with the Facebook Fund, right?
I ran the Facebook Fund for one summer.
So you were close to this big company that is Facebook. So
Yep.
I wonder how it is now today that you should deal with a lot of little companies. How can you take from the experience of dealing with a massive leading company
Right.
and deliver value to you?
So a lot of our, I'm going to get the hook here in just a second. A lot of our investment thesis is on using large existing platforms for customer acquisition. So not just Facebook. So Facebook and Twitter for social, Google for search in most geographies that aren't China, Russia, Korea. Apple and Android for mobile, YouTube again for video. There's probably a few others that are interesting. Pinterest starting to look large. So things that are more than 100 million users, we start to like try and pay attention to as avenues for customer acquisition. And then how do we understand partnerships and feature set functionality, paid and organic distribution on those platforms. So like the thing most of those are in Silicon Valley. We're sort of like lucky because they're very physically close to us. So we established a lot of our mentors and partners from those companies. And then we invest all over the world. People think like, you're crazy, how do you manage like all over the world? And we're like, well, actually, like we're very differentiated to local market investors because we have all the Silicon Valley access and resources. So we're not at a disadvantage, we're actually at an advantage in many ways. Again, with the exception of China and maybe to some extent Russia, the back-end platforms are very similar in most geographies. So most places do use Google for search, Facebook and Twitter for social, YouTube for video around the world. So when we're investing in startups, like again, we're trying to find functional product use, very basic customer problems that people will pay for usually. And then the de-risk areas are usually how do we get customers, how do we get the marketing, engineering, design elements of the team together. And then we just make lots of little bets because we know we're going to be wrong a lot of the time, and we double down on the stuff that works. And then use physical proximity and examples to sort of learn. So even though we get failure in a lot of cases, we have success in a few areas. And construction of sort of that environment so that people can see failure and success and model behavior. It's not really so much us teaching as just us facilitating. Sorry, I'm going long, but thank you again.
One last question for me.
Okay.
How did you see, going back to the brand building, how do you see, especially in the niches and in the foreign markets that you invest in, how do you see startups be successful in areas that you don't know about or the Silicon Valley folks don't know about?
We try and hire people who are local market cultural fluent and speakers. But I mean, in a lot of cases, people give the Samwer brothers too much shit. I think like their strategies have really been quite successful, whether or not there may be other issues to assess there. I think they've built incredible operational capacity around the globe. And just being able to apply that to multiple industries is pretty amazing. But in developing markets, there's less examples of all of those successes. Maybe China's a little different because there's so many people iterating on stuff. So a lot of times the branding exercise is very simple in those environments. You're usually just competing against entrenched offline businesses. And so almost any kind of online business has a relatively simple story to tell around that. And you can play, the David and Goliath story up like over and over and over again. That works really well.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah.